There has been a question lingering quietly for more than half a century since Bruce Lee passed away. Who will tell his true story as the world increasingly commercializes every legend? By 2026, the answer is clearer than ever. His daughter, Shannon Lee. Not as an action star, but as the final guardian of a legacy that is constantly interpreted, exploited, and sometimes distorted. For decades, Bruce Lee's image was often simplified by Hollywood into a purely martial arts icon. A muscular man punching faster than the camera could capture. But Shannon understands clearly that her father was not just an action actor. He was a philosopher, a man who broke racial barriers in American cinema, and the founder of Jeet Kune Do, a way of life before it was a martial art. That is why Shannon's role today is not to promote the Bruce Lee brand through nostalgia. She frequently speaks out when film or media projects misrepresent his image. To her, it is not an emotional reaction of a daughter, but the responsibility of a legacy steward. In an era when stories can be edited to serve the market, Shannon chooses to control the narrative, to control how the story is told. She participates in producing projects related to Bruce Lee to ensure that the philosophy of Be Water is not reduced to an empty slogan. If Bruce Lee once fought to be recognized for his true worth in the 1960s, 1970s, then Shannon Lee is fighting a different battle, protecting the integrity of that image in the digital age. Shannon Lee was born at a time when her father was taking his final steps toward becoming a global phenomenon. Back then, Bruce Lee was no longer just a martial arts instructor within the Chinese-American community. He was preparing to explode onto the scene in Hong Kong and reach the world. But to Shannon, he was first and foremost a father. As the younger sister of Brandon Lee, Shannon grew up in a family that was both famous and determined to preserve its privacy. Her life stretched between Los Angeles and Hong Kong, two cities representing two different value systems. In Hong Kong was the heritage of Eastern culture, discipline and tradition. In America was individualism, freedom, and the confrontation with racial prejudice that her father himself had faced. But everything changed in 1973. When Bruce Lee suddenly passed away, Shannon was only 4 years old. At that age, she was not old enough to understand what the event meant to the world, but old enough to feel the emptiness within her family. His death not only ended a career at its peak, but also placed the Lee family at the center of global curiosity. In 1974, her mother, Linda Lee Cadwell, decided to bring the children back to Los Angeles. It was not a step backward, but an act of protection. Linda wanted her children to have as normal a childhood as possible, away from the press, away from the fabrications surrounding Bruce Lee's death. Shannon did not grow up on red carpets or film sets. She grew up with an absence, the absence of a father the world celebrated, but whom she could only know through memories and stories. It was that cultural intersection, along with the experience of losing a parent too early, that shaped Shannon's identity, both gentle and resolute, appreciative of tradition, yet fully aware of the need to forge her own path. And when tragedy struck again in 1993 with Brandon's death, the memories of 1973 resurfaced. But this time, Shannon was mature enough to understand that her family's legacy was not just fame, it was responsibility. There is an invisible pressure in carrying the Lee surname. People assume that Bruce Lee's daughter must have been born knowing how to deliver a perfect kick. But for Shannon Lee, martial arts was not an inherited privilege. It was a conscious choice. She began training seriously as an adult, not to recreate her father's image, but to understand what made him different. On that journey, Shannon sought out Bruce Lee's direct students such as Richard Bustillo and Ted Wong to study Jeet Kune Do. But what she was searching for was not merely technique. Jeet Kune Do is not a closed system. It is a philosophy of efficiency, adaptability, and honesty with oneself. Shannon had to learn to eliminate unnecessary movements and unnecessary ego, in martial arts as well as in life. It was both a physical and spiritual process. At the same time, she expanded her foundation with Taekwondo to develop kicking techniques and flexibility, Wushu to understand the fluid beauty of traditional Chinese martial arts, and kickboxing with legend Benny the Jet Urquidez to sharpen her practical combat skills. Each discipline added a different piece to the puzzle, preventing her from being confined within the shadow of a single system. Notably, Shannon never tried to become a female version of Bruce Lee. She did not pursue a professional fighter's career or build an image as an action superhero. Instead, martial arts became a tool for her to more deeply understand her father's philosophy. Freedom does not come from imitation, but from self-discovery. Through countless hours of training, Shannon gradually moved from the position of heir to that of one who understands. And it was that understanding that later gave her the foundation to protect Bruce Lee's legacy. Not through emotion, but through knowledge and lived experience. In 1987, when Shannon Lee decided to leave California to study at Tulane University, it was not merely a geographic shift. It was a step away from the enormous shadow called Bruce Lee. New Orleans was not Hollywood. There were no red carpets, no interviews reopening painful family memories. Perhaps for the first time in her life, Shannon could walk into a room without anyone whispering, "That's Bruce Lee's daughter." She chose to major in vocal performance, focusing on opera and musical theatre, a path demanding almost ruthless discipline. Opera does not tolerate half measures. A high note must be supported by steady breath, a strong diaphragm, and absolute concentration. Each vocal practice session lasted hours, repeating techniques that seemed simple but could erode one's will without patience. There were days Shannon had to stand alone in a rehearsal room, confronting her own voice. There was no legacy to lean on, no fame to guarantee success, only the sound emerging from her body, either steady enough or not. It was in those moments that she learned what martial arts and her father's philosophy had always emphasized: honesty. You cannot pretend in opera. Your voice will betray you immediately if you are not truly present. Tulane also gave her something her childhood lacked: ordinary anonymity. She had friends who did not care about a martial arts legend. She attended classes, performed, debated, failed, and stood up again, like any other student. There, Shannon was not a guardian of a legacy. She was simply a young woman trying to understand what she liked, what she feared, and who she wanted to become. Her vocal training also gave her a special ability: stage command. Controlled breathing helped her remain calm before a crowd. Posture allowed her to stand with confidence. Expressive technique taught her that emotion is not for display, but for guidance. When she graduated in 1991, Shannon did not walk away with the ambition of becoming an opera star. What she carried was more important: an identity built on personal effort. A confidence derived not from a surname, but from hard work. Later, when facing the media to defend her father's image, when managing international-scale projects, or when confronting public controversies, that foundation quietly supported her. Tulane did not just teach Shannon how to sing. It taught her how to stand firm, with her own voice. 1993 was a fateful year. The biographical film Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, was released, retelling Bruce Lee's life for a new generation. Shannon appeared in the film in a brief cameo, a symbolic moment rather than the beginning of a career. But behind the premiere lights was another tragedy. That same year, her brother, Brandon Lee, died in a prop gun accident on the set of The Crow. If 1973 took her father when Shannon was 4, then 1993 tore through her family once again, this time when she was old enough to feel the full weight of loss. That cruel coincidence meant that entering the film industry was no longer simply a career choice. It became a space that felt both familiar and filled with painful memories. In the years that followed, Shannon participated in several action projects such as High Voltage, Enter the Eagles, and appeared in Blade. These roles helped her understand how a film set operates, from production pace and commercial pressure to how images are constructed and edited. But gradually, a question began to form within her. Did she want to stand in front of the camera or decide the story behind it? Shannon realized that being an actor meant living within someone else's vision. Being a producer meant holding the power to tell the story. In the mid-2000s, she shifted her focus to behind-the-scenes work. It was not a step away from the spotlight, but a step toward control. She served as a producer on the 50-episode television series The Legend of Bruce Lee in China, a large-scale project that sought to retell her father's life from an Asian perspective. This was followed by documentary and television projects that continued to explore Bruce Lee's philosophy and influence. But the biggest turning point came when an unfinished idea from more than 50 years earlier was revived as the series Warrior. Shannon took on the role of executive producer, ensuring that the original spirit was not flattened by the modern market. Warrior was not just an action series. It was the resurrection of an idea once rejected, at a time when Hollywood was not ready to give a leading role to an Asian man. The eventual realization of that project carried historical significance, not only for the Lee family, but also for Asian representation in the entertainment industry. Through each project, Shannon gradually affirmed one thing: she was not in the film industry to relive the past. She was there to reshape how the past is told. And perhaps that was the moment Shannon Lee truly stepped out of the role of the daughter of a legend, to become a legacy builder through her own choices. After years of transitioning from actress to producer, from appearing in front of the camera to deciding the story behind it, Shannon Lee's life gradually settled into a different rhythm, the rhythm of family. She married Ian Kiesler in the mid-1990s in a modest ceremony that did not become tabloid headlines. For Shannon, marriage was not a public event. After two great losses in her life, Bruce Lee's death when she was very young and Brandon Lee's sudden passing, she understood the fragility of things that seem permanent. Perhaps that is why she chose to keep her private life separate from the spotlight. When her daughter Ren was born, another layer of emotion began to take shape. For the first time, Shannon saw the family legacy not from the position of a daughter, but from that of a mother. The Lee surname was now tied not only to the past, but also to the future of a child growing up in a completely different era. In their home, Bruce Lee is not present as an icon hanging on the wall. He is present through dinner table stories, through family photographs passed around for viewing, through old footage occasionally replayed, not for analysis, but for remembrance. Shannon does not raise her daughter under the pressure of inheritance. She lets things unfold naturally, allowing Ren to encounter family history in her own way, without being pushed to become something specific. At the same time, the work of managing the legacy continues to expand. Media projects, licensing agreements, and new production plans demand constant attention. Shannon has had to learn how to move between two worlds, one of contracts, strategy, and branding, and one of family breakfasts, school schedules, and everyday conversations. There are days when the boundary between those two worlds becomes blurred. An interview about Bruce Lee takes place right after she drops her daughter off at school. A production meeting follows a family evening. The legacy does not disappear when the front door closes. It is always there, an inseparable part of life. Within that parallel rhythm, Shannon gradually shapes how she wants the legacy to exist. Not as an immovable stone of the past, but as a current that can flow into the present without consuming it. In 2019, when the film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was released, a brief scene quickly became the center of debate. In it, Bruce Lee was portrayed with an arrogant demeanor, confident to the point of challenging a fictional character and ultimately being defeated. For many viewers, it was simply an entertaining cinematic detail. But for Shannon Lee, it was not so simple. She understands that film has the right to fictionalize, but she also knows how hard her father struggled in 1960s Hollywood, where Asian actors were rarely given leading roles and racial prejudice still lingered in casting decisions. Bruce Lee had to prove himself many times over to be taken seriously. Portraying him as boastful was not merely an artistic choice, it touched a complex history. Shannon spoke out in multiple interviews, not with attacks, but by restoring context. She mentioned those who had worked with her father, recounting his discipline and seriousness. She spoke of his journey in breaking barriers to make an Asian face a global icon. The debate spread. People discussed creative freedom, the right to fictionalize real figures, the boundary between imagination and distortion. Shannon stood in the middle of that wave, not seeking to censor the work, but also not accepting that her father's image be redefined without response. That was not the first time, nor would it be the last, that Shannon had to confront how Hollywood interprets Bruce Lee. Each time, she must weigh what deserves a response and what should be left alone. The more famous the image, the more easily it is reconstructed from different perspectives. And through those collisions, Shannon's role became increasingly clear, shifting from legacy heir to someone who directly intervenes in how that legacy is told in the present. As the internet began changing the way the world remembers icons, Shannon understood that without active engagement, Bruce Lee's image would be cut, misquoted, or commercialized in ways she could not control. The legacy no longer exists only in film reels or printed books. It lives on YouTube, social media, memes, t-shirts, posters, and video games. Every day, millions quote Bruce Lee, but not everyone understands the context in which he said those words. That is when the Bruce Lee Foundation became a central part of Shannon Lee's strategy. Not merely a preservation organization, the foundation also carries an educational mission, offering scholarships and spreading Bruce Lee's life philosophy in a deeper way than short online quotes. Alongside it is Bruce Lee Enterprises, the arm responsible for brand and licensing management. Shannon does not simply grant image rights. She reviews every project, every product, every use of her father's name. This is not about absolute control, but about ensuring that the original spirit is not reduced to an empty slogan. In the digital era, protecting a legacy no longer means safeguarding old footage. It means participating directly in a global conversation. Shannon appears on podcasts, at conferences, and at talks on leadership and personal development. She writes books, including Be Water, My Friend, not to retell the legend, but to explain the be like water philosophy in the language of a modern generation. At times, she must make difficult decisions, declining a commercially valuable deal that contradicts Bruce Lee's spirit, or accepting a bold project that may spark controversy but expands influence. Each choice draws mixed reactions, especially when a global fan community holds its own expectations about how their icon should be preserved. Shannon cannot please everyone, and she seems to have understood that early on. What she can do is keep the current from drifting away from its source, ensuring that Bruce Lee does not become a flattened image framed in the past, but continues to live in discussions about identity, freedom, limits, and transcending limits. Under Shannon's guidance, the legacy does not stand still. It moves, adapts, expands, much like the philosophy Bruce Lee himself pursued. And in that process, her role evolves as well. Not only a guardian, but a navigator. That current continues, and what lies ahead is not the end of a legend, but the question of how that legend will exist in the decades to come. Bruce Lee once said to be water, flexible, adaptable, yet true to one's essence. For many years, Shannon has not tried to become a copy of her father. She chose instead to become his next current, quiet but persistent, not loud but strong enough to keep the legacy from being swept away in a new era. And perhaps what matters most is not how many projects she has protected, how many contracts she has signed, or how many controversies she has responded to. It is that, in a world constantly trying to redefine the past, she has preserved the right to tell her family's story in the most honest way possible. If you also believe that legends should not be forgotten or distorted over time, leave your thoughts below. What do you think is the greatest part of Bruce Lee's legacy to the world? And has Shannon done enough to protect it? Don't forget to follow the channel as we continue exploring the stories behind the icons you thought you already understood.